Today, once again, we have some very exciting Bitcoin and Ethereum news, as well as a few other crypto news items that have come out. It's very, very important to note right now that the inflation data has turned out better than expected. This is a very bullish sign for the market. Yesterday, despite everything, before we dumped, I even mentioned it in the video that we have a bearish divergence in Bitcoin. I actually took out half of my position in Ethereum again, or rather a third. That means I have now realized about $3,300 and I still have $23,000 in the position with just under $4,000 in profit. But right now we're going up again. Also very nice to see. I did exactly the same with my Bitcoin position. That's $1,570 realized. But I'm actually waiting here for a pullback so I can scale my positions. We'll also go through that in the liquidation hitman. The other position where I released a video on how to use 100 times leverage risk-free. That one is currently at 5,556, 55% profit, but we don't need to pay attention to that. It's just a very small stake. So that was really just to show you how it works. But if this keeps going, it's going to be Lambo time soon. But if we look further now, the inflation data, which was so extremely important, and that's what we're going into. What does that mean for those who don't know? If we look at it now, the forecast for the inflation data was that we would have 2.4 points. However, we ended up doing better. What would have happened otherwise? So let's go through a few scenarios now. 2.4 points would have also been good because that would mean inflation is staying the same. That could have led to a better step towards lowering interest rates. Rising inflation would have been bad for the market. But we actually ended up with even better inflation numbers than expected. That means this is a very, very bullish sign, which could also lead to an interest rate cut. That's why it's going to be very exciting to see what happens as soon as the markets open and whether the markets will actually push things upward and take advantage of this momentum and that it doesn't turn into a sell the news event. By the way, as I mentioned yesterday, if you paid attention to the divergence in yesterday's video, we dropped by almost 5%. Where did we find support? I didn't go short because, well, here in Dubai, with the time difference, it was unfortunately a bit too late for me to monitor it. But if we look at the 15-minute chart, we had an accumulation phase before the breakout. And in fact, that was exactly our bottom for the current price dump we experienced. Now it gets interesting to see how things will continue. Bitcoin is currently exactly at this level here, which previously acted as both support and resistance in its own range. So if we take a look here we had rejection, here we repeatedly found support, and now Bitcoin is fighting right at this spot to break above it. That's why I'm really curious to see what will happen when the market opens, whether we'll manage to break above it and see new highs, or if we'll actually see another sell-off. If we take a look at US Tether dominance, which is very, very interesting. This was yesterday on the 4-hour chart. If we look at this as well, on the 4-hour chart for US Tether dominance. I also posted this in the Telegram group because here we actually had a bullish divergence. And at the same time, we had a bearish divergence on Bitcoin. That means you really could have shorted here. I didn't do it myself because I wasn't at the chart live the whole time, but we did rise a bit above our support line. And I want to show that now, which is incredibly important because we've now come back below this support line. Which support line am I talking about in US dollar dominance? Let's switch to the weekly chart. And if you want to draw this in for yourself, as I said, thanks again to Mo for this. He marked it out so perfectly. Every time we've actually touched this support line here, we've seen a new all-time high in Bitcoin. Again, here as well. The first time we broke below it was in the last bull market when we hit our last all-time highs. And right now we're managing it. At least that's how it looks at the moment. The weekly candle still has some time before it closes. But for now, the price is still below this resistance zone, or rather it's resistance now, whereas before it was support. And that looks very, very good. In the meantime, BlackRock has also accumulated a bit more again. And if you take a look, they're now at 67 billion. Yes, the previous high was 64 billion, so that's 3 billion above what was the all-time high for the ETF figures. And if we keep looking at this, BlackRock was actually the only one yesterday to invest $69 million in Bitcoin, while all the others were selling off. That's why things don't look quite as good right now. We have a net inflow here of 9.1 minus 9.1 million as shown here. So not quite as good, but it's still okay overall. BlackRock continues to increase its holdings. We have bullish news. I also mentioned in the news yesterday everything that has come out. What will happen in the future with possible war negotiations, with the China tariffs, which turned out incredibly well, actually came out right after my video. Now let's take another look at the Bitcoin and Ethereum charts. With Ethereum, I still believe we have a very strong pump. What can we see now? If we don't really retest this key level here, that's what I mentioned as well, that we have support here again. If we don't retest it now, and actually it would be ideal for me if we did, then I could scale my position in this area, or maybe even at this ascending support here. so that we can test this level. If not, if that doesn't happen, and we really remain bullish, then it could also be that we just consolidate up and down here for a while. Let's see what the week brings, which would be very bullish. We could form a bullish pennant, a bull flag, or something like that here. And that would then be another bullish scenario, which could drive us to the next price highs, yes, which could bring us to about this resistance zone here. We'll see. Yes, that's predicting too much ahead when we don't even know yet how things will develop. I would prefer a pullback to scale my open position. By the way, the trading bots as well. I have closed the 4x leverage trading bot, but as we can see here, we've recovered everything again, despite this dump. And for anyone who wants to see it again, despite the dump we had with Ethereum, all the trading bots have now picked up all the safety orders again. And it's really very, very nice to see that we're in profit everywhere, that we have profits across the board, even XLP, Bybit, and these trading bots are just running like a profit machine. So take another look at the end. I'll link it for you again, the tutorials, the whole playlist. I now have 3 videos where I show exactly how to do this. You can follow along step by step in the spot market, and it's free, and you really only stand to benefit if you do it. You can even see it again here on this chart. So yesterday we actually picked up 10 orders here, 10 orders in total. They just hit all the take profits a moment ago. So it's really nice to see, and it keeps going. And if you look at what's happened recently, especially with the uptrend, it just kept racking up profits endlessly. However, I actually prefer this kind of setup because we get to buy back in much more often. But now let's move on to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is very, very interesting, especially when we take a closer look here. Yesterday, we also filled the CME gap I mentioned because the market opened higher. That means we had a few percent here that were interesting. And strangely enough, if we take a look at it, I actually witnessed this live on the chart yesterday while I was sitting in the pool. After this breakout, the CME gap immediately became our resistance. Very, very strange. I mean, we did have a bit of support here, but right at the CME gap, we faced rejection before we broke back above it. But it was super interesting to see what happens next for Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is going to be very, very exciting because we need to look at the liquidation heat map. Currently, a small day, so in one day, we have quite a bit above us. That means there's still something up to 106,000. Below us, a small cluster has formed. For me, it's still interesting when I look at the 2-week chart, and I know nobody wants to hear it. But I always say, let's look at the chart neutrally. I don't want to blindly jump into a position. I'll scale my positions as soon as we've picked up this area down here. I know nobody wants to see 93, 92 and things like that. We're so high up. Guys, I'm telling you again, and if this actually happens, remember that I showed you this. That's exactly this area right here. I'm doing a little bit now. I'll also hide this again so you can see it a bit more clearly. I really just want to show this for you. This white line, that's the area where we currently have all the liquidity. And again, in the past, no matter how high the prices were, we always went back there and picked it up. That's why it wouldn't surprise me. And I still remember how I said this last year, hey, we're so high up, but even back then, we had an incredible amount of liquidity lying here. And we just scooped it up. And for me, that would be the point where I'd say, that's when you can really make a big entry again. Of course, with Bitcoin there are also other options in the smaller liquidation heat map time frame that we can set, namely in the range from 99,000 to 98,800. That means if we go down here and we see that something is starting to develop here so that we pause a bit, that would be 98,800. Let's take a look at that. Where would this price range be? That would be roughly the price range where my key level is. Take a look at this. This is my key level, 97 to 98,000. So, right here in this area where the support is as well. The key level extends up to 99,518 so that we actually have this here. And then we would have this wonderful price action that we could continue further. It was very small here. But in this area, we actually made it quite significant, and it would be nice if we could dip into it again. That would also fit well with this part here, and we would have the continuation of a nice price action. When that will happen, I can't say. Does it have to happen? No. We could also just keep rising like this, and that's something you definitely need to keep in mind. But again, you don't just jump in blindly just because I say, okay, we could be bullish and I'm going long, because everyone, I already mentioned this in yesterday's video, anyone who would have entered in this area would have been temporarily down 5% due to market movement, depending on the leverage. If you have 10 times leverage, that would already be a 50% interim loss, and that's not what we want. And that's why it's important to really do chart analysis. And in the next videos, I'll also include the 15-minute time frame, because of course these small clusters that are forming everywhere here can be used to very clearly. Assess where we have potential entry opportunities and also compare that with the liquidation heat map. If we take another look at the liquidation heat map here, we currently have a lot sitting at $2,400. So that's what's currently being pumped right now. However, we also need to look at a larger time frame. That means just 3 days, a week, and 2 weeks. Where could a real pullback happen? But you can see here, okay, I strongly suspect that we'll pick up this cluster with a small dump and then go back up again, because this cluster, you can see here, what was very strong before has dissolved a bit. And also down here where there were billions before, that has also already dissolved. So the people who had their liquidations here may have already closed out a bit here. Now, what else is interesting with Bitcoin? Let's take a look at the 1-hour chart, because we have a significant high and a significant low. If we now apply the Fibonacci levels to this, in this small time frame, we need to make sure we hit exactly this level. And if you know my Fibonacci video, where I told you that the 0.618 and 0.65 are the most important zones for trade, where you usually get a rejection after the 0.786. There the chance is even higher, but that's where it happens most often. And we'll remove the BPVR again, so that we have a rejection exactly at the 0.618 Fibonacci, and then we could get another reversal to the downside. We'll see if it really happens that way. Currently, this is the most valid Fibonacci we have in the small time frame. You can see we really had a rejection exactly at the 0.618. If the stock market doesn't really pump above this with the opening now, because what are our significant highs and lows? Exactly what I've just drawn in. Either we have to go above here, or we drop below here. And that's exactly when it will be decided how things continue. Either we get a rejection here as well, or we actually finally manage to break above it to reach new highs. If we should lose this low here, which was also the accumulation phase at the same time, then we'll first find ourselves back in this price range here, where the liquidation zones are, as I mentioned to you. That means I'm very curious about the stock market opening now. Leave a like, drop a comment, and we'll see each other again tomorrow. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make a video earlier today, but it's actually more interesting now since we've received the CPI data, that is the inflation data, and we can possibly prepare for the market, for the stock market opening, so that there will be significant volatility, giving us a few opportunities to maybe open some small scalp trades. Until next time, ciao, ciao.